Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Wayward, a Black Woman podcast. My name is Alicia Gray, or AM Gray if you like, and today I'd like to discuss several topics, the first of which would be greed, the second would be misogyny, and the third would be envy. So the title of today's podcast would be Greed, Misogyny, and Envy on today's episode of the Wayward Black Woman podcast. Stay tuned. I think all of us have heard about, to start off today's discussion, what's going on with the CEO who was recently killed of United Healthcare, the former CEO, Brian Thompson. We've heard about this situation, and it's impossible not to have heard about the reaction to this gentleman who's the same age as I am. He's 50. About this gentleman being gunned down in broad daylight, shot in the back, and killed, and allegedly from a person who had a grudge against him due to his political involvement in the healthcare scandal that's gripping the United States, where people are getting grifted out of their very lives and their livelihoods. So, amongst other things in the United States, greed is a terrible problem. We have the Blackstone and BlackRock situation, where it's everything from rental housing to mortgages to, at this point, utilities, because they also are associated with the burning down of Maui, and now Texas is suing at least one of them, because there are several different companies, but they're really all operating still as one, because we can include Vanguard in there. We can also include all of the affiliated companies with these, organizations that are pretending not to be a conglomerate. They were, several years ago, separated legally, but they still kind of operate as one. And I think Texas right now is suing one because of the power situation. And just because of this monopoly that continues to exist, that is pretending not to be a monopoly. Greed. Same thing with the healthcare industry, where, we have a situation where the top 5% still own the majority of wealth. Well, when we're talking about the basics, okay, and this should be something, and I know everyone's sick of the Democrats not doing their jobs. It should be illegal for anyone to control the basic assets of someone's life. And this is what is happening in the United States. Electricity, utilities, oil, gas. When you're talking about people who are in cold areas that need to have utilities in order to survive. When you're talking about someone's food choices, when you're talking about having someplace safe to live, no one should be allowed to raise your rent to the point where you have no way of paying it. No one should be allowed to say you only have certain food choices because in this area, this is all that's going to be available is this type of food. We know that's illegal, right? We've combated a lot of things where food is concerned, but we still have a lot, of work to do there. And you guys know I've been in Asia, and they have, in some of the Asian countries, a hard time getting food. They have a lot of surprising food deserts. So I'm not clowning the United States, but I'm saying with the resources that we have, we can still do a lot better. And, as far as healthcare, there's a lot of shocking things going on. Some things are being done by the Democrats that are shocking, and more so, people are afraid of when the Republicans do come into office, if it will get worse. For instance, many people are complaining they can't afford the health care coverage that's going on right now with, these greedy CEOs. What's going to happen, and people don't think about it from this end, because I found out this was going on with the Democrats. If you guys know about the healthcare system, I don't like to call it Obamacare, but that was put into place by Obama. They're now going up in some states, and they're expanding Medicaid to the point where you have to make a certain amount not to get Medicaid. So I think the threshold, and it might depend upon the state, is $35,000 a year not to be able to be thrown into Medicaid, right? So you don't have a choice anymore in those states. And that was shocking to me, because that's really socialism, for them to tell you you don't have a choice but to get this type of insurance or to get nothing. So you don't get a subsidy at all in some states anymore for the so-called Obamacare if you make, $35,000 or less. Now, put this into perspective. Most people still in this country, and I say this country, I mean the United States, are making what? Between $9 and $13 an hour. That's not even $35,000. So, we were watching some special, my daughter and I, last night about Whole Foods and how they were, acting more like Amazon in the warehouse, where you can't take breaks and, you don't have bathroom breaks, and they're firing people for overworking them because, Whole Foods is owned by Amazon now. Well, they weren't making but $13 an hour in Seattle or something, which is nothing. And I'm thinking, God, at least in New York, they try to have some perspective and pay them $19, because the prices in New York are so high. You have to make that, that's their minimum wage, $19 an hour. But in Seattle, that's highway robbery to be paying people $13 an hour. Now, understand, I'm from the South, and $8 an hour, $9 an hour, we're just picking up the $13 an hour. Some people are still getting paid $8.50, and I got paid $8.50 in 1990, whatever. And I was getting paid $14 in, 1990, whatever. And it was still hard then, and I'm a single mom, had to pay daycare and all that kind of good stuff. But it was still hard. Car payment, car insurance, rent, daycare, on that little bit of money. So imagine now in 2024, almost 2025, people are still making that amount of minimum wage. It's disgusting. Greed. It's disgusting in the United States, and we still have the 5% making millions of dollars off the backs of not only Americans, but sick Americans. It's disturbing. And on the other end, we have, a trend towards socialism that no one's talking about. And you say, well, at least you have coverage, you have Medicaid, but you don't have a choice but to have $35,000. I think for the last 30 years, the threshold has been around maybe $1,600 to $2,100 for Medicaid. Now it shot up to $3,500 or $3,000. Looking at about $34,000 a year, $35,000, maybe $3,100 a month. That's a huge difference. Well, I'd say $35,000 is what? Between $28,000 and $3,000 a month. Still a big difference. And the majority of people in this country, I would say 30 to 40%, make that amount. A lot of people in African American communities, and we're talking even sometimes two-parent families, make only between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. And most certainly single parents, no matter how much you work, are still going to make, either that equivalent or less. So they're going to qualify a lot of these people for Medicaid, and they're going to be forced to get it. That was shocking. I just found that out the other day by looking at the healthcare.gov form, because I was like, what is going on here? That is going on. So that's the first thing. We must understand we're being kind of pushed and pulled here. On one end, we're getting robbed for our lives here, literally, by getting claims denied and having to pay medical bills that we can't afford, being denied care that is causing us literal, death in our families. And on the other end, we're being forced to take care that may be subpar, because you have to realize a lot of things you can't get on Medicaid. If you're on a certain medication, you're going to be denied because they don't cover it, or you just can't get anything but the generic. And sometimes that generic is not what you need. So you're going to be kind of squeezed in the middle here. You're still going to get denied. And that is socialism. And for those of you who are afraid of socialists, because I have a number of people, in my academic career that have been associated with socialism, because socialism in the past has worked in certain conditions. But I think it's only aspects of socialism, right? It's not every type of socialism that works. Whether it be democratic socialism or not, we must look at the pitfalls here. Looking at what the problem is, has not been a strong point for America. We just handle the sickness or whatever it is, throw some cough medicine at it and push it out the door. And that has to end. You have to handle the root problem. Now, dealing a lot with the internet, I've seen a lot of people, which I posted, praise the killer for killing Brian Thompson, which I don't care what you guys say, I'm never a fan of murder. Sometimes it's necessary to defend yourself, but I'm not going to praise killing these CEOs, all of them, whether it be healthcare or not. I'm not going to join that revolution, right? We need to solve the problem. These people, the 5%ers, are literally stealing our lives away. They have it set up so they have a certain downline of people that are going to be involved in business, no matter how much you work, no matter where you go. It's who you know, who you're related to, and who, has decided to join these little, secret societies or groups to invite themselves in to this game that they're playing. And it's time for it to stop. Some people have lucked up and gotten into, friendship groups and things of that nature that may have less education than you, and they're more successful. Maybe their family had money. We've seen this a lot in African American communities where generational wealth has helped a lot of people of non-color, and some people of color as well. I'm not going to lie. But you have to realize when you've gotten that leeway, that help, that hand up, even if it's the church or whoever gave you whatever they gave you, they still gave it to you. And while they gave it to you, they held others back that were equally as qualified, if not more qualified, especially in the African American community. And that is something we have to face. I think it's a lot of denial amongst Black people, all this hustling, all this, I found a way to do this and a way I don't have to pay that, and that's how I was successful. That's hustling, right? And you were lucky. And where I come from, there's a lot of millionaires and billionaires in the Black community that would tell you, I just lucked up into this. They're just going to be honest with you. Because I know there's people out here struggling that work their behinds off every single day or have done the same thing I've done, and they were not as lucky, right? And you talk about people like Pharrell and people that come from Virginia, where I'm from, and they'll tell you, because they know that we will call them out. There's a lot of people out here that just luck up. I'm not saying they're not talented. I'm not saying they're not smart. I'm saying it takes a lot of hustle. People talk about this guy on YouTube called Hustle Bitch. That's his name of his YouTube channel, because that's what he's doing. But I like the way, because they were saying Jimmy Fallon, is that his name? One of the nighttime hosts was talking about him the other day, and one of his theories. But I like the way the guy, lays it on the line. He's not just hustling. I mean, he puts the work down, but he also tries to do something right within his commentary, right? He's not gossiping, all this kind of stuff. He's talking about issues that might help people. He started off, as a matter of fact, talking about Maui and trying to help those people there after it mysteriously burned down, or at least portions of it. So I get that. Okay, if you want to hustle like that, then I'm right here behind you. I'm here for you. You want to gossip, that's fine. That's how you make it. That's fine. There's a place for entertainment in our lives. But if that's all that you're doing, and then on top of that, you're bringing down the Black community, you're disrespecting people who aren't out there doing it, who do the right thing, you're encouraging violence towards women, especially African American women, forget it. I'm not feeling you. I'm not encouraging you. I think that we need to wake up in the African American community and stop fighting one another, and stop all of this hustle mentality to the point where it's ridiculous. If Diddy didn't teach you anything, because I know people have been hustling their whole darn lives. And that once they get to that pinnacle, when they get to the top, that feeling they get, it isn't what they think it's going to be. It's not about the money. It's this false feeling of control. But as soon as someone puts you down and you realize that you don't have as much as you thought, you get that nod from that white man that you're not really in the club, you will find one of two things will happen. They will try to attack someone. Namely, if there's a Black woman, they'll put that Black woman down in some way, especially these insecure younger Black men. And we're going to get into misogyny later. And they'll start to internalize these things, and they don't have anyone there to blame. And they'll start feeling bad about themselves. Because the truth is, it's not going to go away just because you have wealth or an avenue towards it. It's only going to make your insecurity worse. So what we're finding is the illusion is being broken. The Diddys, the CEOs, the fallacy that's there. Now, they said this guy was a nice guy. I don't know. Sometimes people said he was a mean guy. He turned people down a lot. I don't know. Sometimes if you're in a position of power, you have to be both nice and mean at the same time. So maybe that's what kind of vibe he gave off. Right? But understand, being the company man, quote unquote, isn't always going to be what people think it's going to be. Being these top people, or being one of these type people, doesn't necessarily make you the best at what you do. It just means you had the opportunity to be one of the best. And people have talked about people like Mark Zuckerberg and that movie and Facebook, how he backstabbed those twins. And you have to look at the background of how these people got to where they were. How Steve Jobs, when he started Microsoft, it was 666 and all of these other things that were associated with the things that they've done that were possibly malevolent, right? With how they got to where they were. And we don't know what happened behind the scenes there with Steve Jobs and all of this and all of that. There was a lot of Freemasonry involved, I'm sure. But the point is, people helped them along the way. Everyone knows Masonry is basically you watch my back, I'll watch yours. So they help each other in business as well. That is just something that happens. People who know one another will help one another. If you don't have those connections, I don't care how smart you are, how much you hustle, you're still going to have a difficult time. And our society really should not be like that. That makes it so uneven for those who are sincere out here and trying to make a living. It also increases a lot of misogyny and things that we wish weren't there for women, sexism, because we don't fit into that old, boys club. So that brings me to the second topic here, misogyny. While traveling, I've seen a lot of things in Asia, one of which, unfortunately, has been the rise in misogyny. Even though we like to try to, in the United States, think that we're in this little box, there's still a feeling, I should say, of we're missing something. So when we see situations of misogyny arise, white male patriarchy in particular, we see the rise of that with Donald Trump and the religious right, it becomes a signal that is just nagging at us, right? When you see Islam, when I'm traveling, I see a lot of that. Even though I have no problem with Islam, there is, misogyny there. And you see the cultivation of how men across the world have been given this privilege, the male privilege. And it's there, even if they're nice men, it's still there, still present, right? Mm-hmm. Some areas you can't wear shorts. Women can't wear shorts because of Islam. And you still see the male gaze, right? You experience it firsthand. It's not just a textbook scenario. And you see where it came from. In the United States and the West, of course, they would never get away with that. But still we're dealing with epidemics of sexual assault, sexual violence, women not dating, younger women not dating because they know this to be true. And they're not attracted to someone who's envious of women. I mean, let's just, say it like it is. I think a lot of these men have perhaps closeted sexuality issues. That's not a stereotype, that's just true. We've seen them come out in the past. But because religiosity comes into it, you don't really get a chance in some areas to get into the sexuality portion of it because men are taught to cover it up. They're normalizing violence towards women. And I have an issue with that. I have an issue with global male patriarchy, whether it be religious patriarchy or not, making a huge return and disrespecting women to a point where we are mere objects again. And it's affected my life, even though I've not had very many men in my life at all. Besides my cousins, I didn't grow up with my father, and Jasmine's father's been out of the picture since, 2 weeks after she was born, other than some child support things and, him wanting visitation when he felt like he wanted visitation. Those days are over, but, and of course my son now, because we raise young boys, which is why it's significant to me. Even though my son has autism, I still have to think about the future. And a number of people have indicated that, as K. Michelle did in her song Can't Raise a Man, right? For those of you who listen to R&B music, and now she sings some country music. You can't raise a man if you're a woman. We can, and we do in Black communities because there are a number of Black women as single parents, but it's hard to raise a man because we have to teach him how to respect women when other men out there may be teaching him wrong. And the opposite, whether or not they're religious or not. Religious patriarchy is going to be a problem in our immediate future. And we, as Black women, are always going to be targeted. I don't care what anyone tells you, you're the most vulnerable. We should be a protected class. And I've said that we are a protected class, but legally we're not. Ask yourselves why. It is really to the point where we have to wonder, I've told you sometimes in Africa they beat the women. Sometimes in Saudi Arabia, if the women are maids, they go over there, they don't return or they get beaten. Or I'm not sure what they do with their wives. I'm not sure. I can't say specifically in Dubai. They may beat the maids and do things of that nature if they're African, or the women over there get treated badly. We've heard the horror stories of African American women going over there and getting locked up for talking back. Okay, it's not a thing where this doesn't exist anymore. It is a thing where it still exists, and I think African American women are spreading out, and we're finding out that we're changing, but the world is not changing with us because the men don't want to change. And some of the women have become adapted in these areas to this. They're internalizing that misogyny because they don't know any better. And we're caught in the middle. So then we go back to these fantasies of these men who are closeted, some of them. They want to date women such as ourselves. But then they have this insecurity. We've seen this many times before. They use violence towards women because they feel insecure about themselves and their manhood, and the women reject them. It's commonly seen in rape. It's rejection rape. It happens a lot. But what's happening now is more so they don't even assume that the woman wants to date them because they know that that's going to be a turnoff for them. In their minds, they know that nobody wants someone like that, but they won't admit it because they have too much pride and too much ego. So then they try to hide behind misogyny or patriarchy or religious patriarchy as an excuse. But the truth is, it's just a front. It's just like the old boys club, but it's religion attached. It's misogyny attached. It's still just someone who's an afraid little boy who thinks he's going to be rejected on the inside and decides to attack women, whether they know these women or not, because it's easier to pretend, quote unquote, that woman is vulnerable and has no choice. And this is where we get into, now I'm saying vulnerable, Black women are vulnerable, but I mean vulnerable to the point where they can't be defended. Like they are an object in a field and they're just, a lamb to slaughter. We are here for the taking because they know that we don't have men protecting us most of the time. And we don't really need men. Honestly, in most cases, we just need a knife or a 32 or something. But it's more so you don't have the validity of other women. As long as I can find a way to manipulate you into thinking that yourselves, then I can control you. And if I can't control you, then I can still attack you behind your back. A lot of these men are R-worders, rapists, the Diddy types. They are taught that they have no power. They have no real confidence. Women just want them for this or that, or they were hurt by someone who was a woman in their lives. Hurt by their fathers, which they'll never admit. Sometimes their fathers are still there, hurting them, hurting their feelings, making them feel like they're lesser than a man. And people always negate that. When we're talking about manhood and we're talking about bell hooks and all of the things that, her philosophy, or I should say the late Miss Bell Hooks, she was one of the greatest philosophers. Yale educated, yes, but still understood the hood. It's very rare. And to speak the truth about, manhood and how it's actually causing so many problems in the Black community. It still is. It still is. And we're still being victimized by it. We have to understand that there are things at play that aren't necessarily caused by women. When men have other men that abuse them or treat them badly, or they feel like they're inadequate in reference to, it doesn't matter what women do, they're still going to have low self-esteem. And they always seem to negate the men, whether the men were there or not. They always seem to find some type of feeling that is negative towards the woman that is there. And this is patriarchy. This is the misogyny. This is the problem. This is the bottom line. It's the bottom line occurring in all religious sects. It's the bottom line occurring in reality here. We're still dealing with the same problem, and we have to resolve it. It is not something that's going to go away. You can internalize it. You can, do whatever you would like. The truth is, it's not going anywhere until we decide to resolve it. Now, one thing I do see happening from the text, as I remember from my school days in college, the Black feminist rhetoric of reintroducing the opposite of sexism, meaning the hyperrealization of male rap with women doing it. We used to do some of that in the 90s, where we can be just as hard as they can be, especially when gangster rap was out, and we can do it better than they can do it. Now, I'm not arguing that women can't do music in any way they choose, and sometimes we do it better than men. But in particular, I was watching, I don't know if you guys have heard of her, name is Doechii. She was on tour with Doja Cat, and I thought, okay, this is intriguing. And I saw some of her work, and she does a lot of things which I would consider to be a follow-up from the 90s rap. Not only 90s, but that whole decade that was kind of skipped. That dum 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 dum. For those of you guys who remember that decade where they were experimenting a lot and doing a lot of the new style of rap, which we thought was going to go a lot further. Who's a black sheep? All of that kind of stuff. She is a hyper-realization of the men, because they were only men during that time. And she kind of perfected her style and added in some things. The instrumental things are very different and new. I will give her that. They're very talented musicians, and I saw her on Tiny Desk the other day, the little Tiny Desk concert, and I thought that was cute. She has her style perfected, but it is, in essence, a hyper-realization of the male rap during the 90s that was cut off. And she does some Busta Rhymes type things. All of hers, you can clearly see what she's doing. And then she does the Twista, where Twista was known for being misogynist, that rapper that spoke really quickly. And so in her mind, I'm thinking she's probably trying to readdress these issues of these male-centered rappers by doing it better than they did it, right, as a woman. And there's a section if you guys have ever taken a class in feminism or women's studies or even black feminism, where they talk about how black women aren't going to be able to necessarily resolve sexism by doing a hyperrealization of what men have already done. Hyperrealization meaning it is a, how can I put this, a fictional version of reality where it's just kind of hyperrealized. This is what I could do. This is a version of this, but it's not really reality. Kind of like you would use in a painting. It's hyper real. So I think that what we're looking at is women trying to express themselves, but perhaps doing it in a way that still gets the attention of the male gaze. We're still trying to show them, I can do this. I can do it better than you. And this competition, right? In a way, it's childish, because we already know that patriarchy is going to pretend like we didn't do it and just ignore it. And it's going to be a situation where you're kind of like competing with your little brother or your brother or in a family or something. And I think that when women get married, they think it's going to be like that. Like if you have a brother in your family, you're going to be like buddy buddy with your husband. And I've seen some women do that, and I don't know how they do it. Most of them end up getting divorced, but they think their husband's going to be more like their buddy and their brother. And it ends up, being a disappointment to them when they realize that men are not your siblings. They're not, they might be your best friend if you're very lucky, but they're not like that. And it's not going to be a friendly competition of you playing football with them and I've seen so many women like that. And if you have a relationship and you're comfortable with that, I'm not putting you down. But I have to always, kiss your behind and go to a football game in the cold. I don't mind going to a sports game every now and again. Some sports I like, but if I always have to conform to whatever you want, and I've seen them gung ho. They love, football. They love sports. If you like that, great. If you want to throw football games and you were raised by your father and he gave you a lot of attention and this is what you feel like men like and you were engaged to be like that. I won't say that you were programmed to be like that, but that's how you were, reared. Great. But is that really something that women in a relationship should have to do, right? And does he understand the things he should be doing for you as well? Or are you just some person who takes care of the kids, who works, who plans this next football get together? Or does he do what he needs to do in a relationship in order to please you? And is he taught that he is to do that? And I'm not just talking about a breadwinner, because obviously if you're working, he's not necessarily. And that's the whole thing too with these young girls. They come up and they're confused, mixed signals. Oh, I don't want to make him feel like he should be the breadwinner. Maybe I should just take over and I definitely have to work, and not necessarily just to have your own, but just to prove to him that you're not trying to take from him because he's got low self-esteem. You know what I mean? And you're always wondering if you should pay half, and maybe you should pay for his. This is the way it is right now. This is why the women aren't dating. Like, I'm not paying for your food. Like, you got dudes sleeping on their couches, right? Having sex with them so they can have somewhere to sleep. Hey, and I'm not dodging a hustle, right? But I'm like, just be straight up. You need somewhere to stay. Can I stay with you tonight? And in the game there, you know what I mean? And they won't become a misogynist game where men are sleeping on your couch and, trying to sleep with you so they can have somewhere to stay. I think that what it is women are gaining power in one direction, but in the other direction, they're not gaining any. In reality, you're just standing still. Because if you're still sitting here trying to figure out how you're going to not live in your car, paying all the bills that you're paying, whether you have kids or not, you work in 2 jobs. And I was talking about that Amazon story earlier. To go back to that, the Amazon worker was a woman. She was upset because she worked part-time in Amazon, and she was doing double duty and part-time at Whole Foods. And she got injured at Amazon and got a concussion. They were like, no, can you just go ahead and do your next order? And if you don't feel well, then, that if you guys want to watch this documentary, it's about Whole Foods, is on YouTube. She was like, the boss was like, well, can you do one more order and then shop one more order? If you don't feel well, then you can go home. And this chick had a door fall on her or something because she was trying to work too quickly and got a concussion. And they wanted her to keep working. And that's when she realized that she was useless. And I think that this is how we are in relationships with men. We know that we have to do what we have to do, but then we think, am I really getting the value out of this relationship that I need to be getting? And some women just stay, just like you stay at a job. You need the money. Maybe you need this dude because he has money. Maybe you need something else the dude is doing for you. Or maybe you just don't want to leave, just like you don't want to leave your job because you're afraid. And everything in life is a choice. Maybe you won't have the safety and security by yourself that you would have with this man, just the same as if you quit one of your jobs or if you quit that job and try to find another. Maybe it's going to be a struggle. Maybe you're going to have to live in your car. Maybe you'll find you like it better because you have more freedom. Maybe you'll be able to travel. Maybe you'll find a better job. Maybe you'll find a better man. But life is a journey, and you have to go on it, and you cannot let patriarchy control your mind forever. And there's a lot of African-American women out there going through this, a lot of women in general. They're getting the confidence to move on and move forward. And I've said this before, some are moving abroad, and we're finding out that globally women haven't necessarily been given the same amount of freedom as we have, and it's disappointing and it's worrying because you're coming from an environment where you can see you have at least the freedom to work and to hopefully not be abused and, all of this stalked and all of that. Some of us haven't even been too lucky in that arena, but another conversation. But then you step into an environment where it's kind of repressive. So you have to balance. You may see a lot of women who are in Islam or a lot of women in their religion who were taught to kind of step back and let the men lead. And the men aren't necessarily anything but beta males. You know this, but you stay out of it because you don't want to make waves. So we're caught in that middle, but we have to do for self, and that's the bottom line for self-care, right? So this is where we are. So the last topic today that I'd like to discuss is going to be envy. You guys are going to have to forgive me because I'm actually recovering today from strep throat. So I know I sound a little bit under the weather. My voice is a little deeper than normal. Sorry about that. But we're going to go ahead and finish what we're doing because I think it's important for us to get it done. We need to talk. We need to collaborate. We need to converse in order to be able to solve the problems that we have. Because if we don't discuss these things, the problems will simply continue. They'll continue in another place. They'll continue at another time. And they will go on and on and on. So the last topic here, envy. When we're talking about the basis of what's causing male patriarchy, it's hard to ignore the fact that there's some envy towards women. It is something people don't like to talk about. It's something people simply ignore. But I can't. Instinctively, many people don't have a psychological attachment to envy like I don't. I don't have any jealousy. I don't have any envy. I'm not naive. It's just unnatural for me to feel envious towards anyone. I don't have anger towards people naturally. Even if I've been burnt by that said person or type of person before, I don't hold a grudge against you unless you do something to me to cause a particular problem. And even then, I'm just going to walk away from you or not deal with you unless you keep bothering me, right? I'm not going to have a grudge against anyone and everyone that looks like you. That's just not me. So you have to understand that's most people. That's most folk. So when men have grudges against women because they have this power struggle going on. And again, I keep comparing this to studies regarding rape because it has been shown that many of these men are power rapists or, rapists for other reasons because they've been rejected, because many of these are connected to violence, particularly from men. They have these insecurities and they're starting to invade our society whether we want to be bothered or not. And it's normalizing violence towards women, although women are slowly making progress. Now, the difference between slowly making progress and actually making progress is what we're having the conversation about, the delusion. We look like we're making progress, but because we still have those naysayers, not only men, but women who are internalizing sexism and misogyny, we're still not getting very far. In particular, in the West, with the white male patriarchy and the religious patriarchy now joining forces with Donald Trump, we see this, right? We see the underpinnings of it in Islam and other areas, in particular with the hijabs and even though the women are smart and they're allowed, quote unquote, to do certain things, go to school, be doctors, and so forth and so on, that is still what we call benevolent misogyny, right? I'm going to hold the door open for you, whether you like it or not, as a textbook example of it. I held the door open for you. Why are you complaining? Because I didn't ask you to hold the door open for me, and you didn't give me a choice of whether or not. I wanted you to hold the door open for me, right? I let you go to school and become whatever you wanted to become as long as you wore the hijab and were Islamic. And we, again, created this atmosphere where you were reared in, wearing the hijab and Islam, similarly to watching sports and other, activities which taught you this is the way that you should be. It depends on your environment, folks. When women are raised in environments where things are acceptable to men, and it's obvious, once they're out of that environment, a lot of these young women choose not to live that lifestyle. I'm not saying religious-wise. You can believe in whatever God that you choose or choose to believe in none of them. That choice is always available no matter whom, you decide to worship or to not worship at all. But whether or not you choose to put men ahead of women within that worship, that is something that has been embedded within our society from day one of us, where we are now, what we remember, right? And it's a book that I have, which I have not released, which talks about us remembering who we are spiritually. We have forgotten who we are spiritually, especially as women. You must start to remember who you are. Spiritually who you are, deep inside. And many people within these religions will tell you, well, yes, we understand that. We understood that the basis of what Jesus said was really what Mary meant. And then we understood within Islam that the men truly worship women underneath it all. And in Catholicism, there was female this and that. Okay. We understand you're being humble. And we understand that unfortunately, some women feel like it's their place to stand in back of men and be humble. But what is the difference between being humble because you have to, because he held that door open for you, and how dare you not walk through it, and he's going to stand there and hold it until you do, and you having that choice to say, no, thank you, I'll hold the door myself. And if he wasn't there at all and you just held the door and went in by yourself. And there was never that forced feeling of accommodation. This is what I'm talking about, the envy of some men. The power. I have to have this power over women. I have to exploit women. When you cross that line, I don't care if you're in Sudan and there's a misogynist man and you're in a camp somewhere and you feel like you're being put upon, because there's a last bit of food and the men aren't sharing it with the women. It shows up in every place you go. Whether you're in the projects and the men join gangs and start forcing the women to silently go in at 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock, because after that the men control the streets and they know it's going to be wild, and they start silently controlling the women's movements. Women can't go here. Women can't wear this. Women can't do that. We see that in Islam. As I said before, women can't wear shorts in certain areas because, of course, that would be unsightly and a distraction for men. They will say to God or whatever, but come on. Come on. We're all adults here. If I have to wear dark colors of hijab and I cannot wear shorts and I have to cover my whole body, except for my face, long pants, no matter what, determination of Islam that this is, whether it be Shia Islam, where they cover their whole bodies and their faces, or whether it be, I'm just going to wear modern clothes and long sleeves and long pants. Or in some societies, their version of Sufi Islam is just to wear skirts, and even the men wear like a type of robe and cover their heads with their little kufis, and the women wear like the handmade scarves and things. It's still the same thing. I've seen it in Thailand, I've seen it in Bali, and, in other places. So some people say, well, I just don't like Islam. But is it Islam that you don't like? Is it? How is it any different from Christianity other than they physically embody what Christianity says in its words? I mean, you could quickly become the handmaid's tale in Christianity just as much as in Islam or any other religion. Because the bottom line is that male envy that is hidden within patriarchy, male patriarchy. And I said this about gay marriage, and I said this about a number of other things. People are like, well, they got the freedom to get married, but it's still patriarchy. They're still married under the guise of male patriarchy. There's nothing wrong with wanting a long-lasting relationship and wanting to solidify it and put it on paper. That's great. But why demonize people who don't do that? And whether you're gay or straight, they've basically said it doesn't matter, right? Because male patriarchy is still in full effect. And I just need people to understand that. As long as that standard is in place, whether it be Donald Trump, whether it be the UAE, whether it be in Asia somewhere, it's going to be worldwide. And it can quickly descend into the gallows of hell if we start to add race within that narrative. Because your mind automatically is going to think white men, any man who falls underneath that, who feels disempowered because, of the envy he has towards women. And I'm not getting into Freud and womb envy and all of that. Some people think it's misogynist. For those of you guys who don't know, I do have a master's in psychology, but I'm not going to get into that. Okay? Or females being misogynist towards men. I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying it seems odd. If you have power, why do you want more power? Why are you still envious of women? Why do you still want to control women? Why do you keep insisting upon male-centered godliness when we know that women were a central part of religion from the beginning? And I should say spirituality versus religion, because when we got into the actual underpinnings of religion, I mean, going back to when, supposedly there was a cross scene and, it was just basically an accommodation of Christianity within the goddess religions, right? When the king saw the cross and there was all of this, hey, I can combine Christianity with these other goddess religions, which is basically what it was, and incorporate this into something that would get me more power. But it was just a facilitation, right? He turned all the holidays that were formerly goddess holidays into religious Christian holidays, right? In order to please the Roman Catholic Church and give him more power. So when we saw this synchronicity, we call it syncretic validation of religion, when this happened, that's when people started forgetting about the past and started demonizing the past. And yes, there was a lot of deviation from actual goddess religions into sexual orientations, because there's always that chance of any religion of moving in that direction. But that only shows there needs to be more research, right? It doesn't mean there's a total invalidation of those former religions or spiritualities into paganism. And this is the mistake that we're making, because we also wrote off all women everything became male-centered. Everything became about patriarchy. And it's so funny. There's so many people out there who say, when we look at these pictures, especially in Christianity, of Jesus Christ, why the background looks like it was done during a time frame that was more recent. And why does it look like, especially during the French Renaissance and all of these artworks and things that were actually, put out during that time, why does it look like these people are actually in Istanbul and other areas? I'm just putting it out there. You must understand. I mean, there is the rumor that, the Bible has been tampered with. It was actually written by someone else. Several people think William Shakespeare somehow had something to do with the rewriting of it. I don't know. Several people believe that there's a part of history we don't remember because we've been brainwashed to make it kind of an event that we want to forget. We're misremembering, or we're just remembering what people taught us without doing the research. And I find this a part of indoctrination. Do your research. Understand the history of Sufi Islam and how it has affected both Christianity and the current Islam that it is today. Understand before Islam the religions that came before that, and understand how other religions have incorporated male patriarchy into its core, or into their cores, so that we have just one solidified conglomerate of the same thing right now. Now, you guys know I'm agnostic. I'm not going to act like I'm confused. I would just rather say I'm very well educated. I'm not going to pick and choose when many of these religions are just composites of the same. They are. And, forgetfulness has been something that's been harmful not only to women, but to our society as a whole. When we look at the envy of men towards women, it's not going to be a collective effort to admit it, but we have to start admitting it to ourselves. If you know people are participating in violence towards women, whether they're using religion as a basis, whether they're using misogyny, whether they just have mental health issues. Of course, I'm a single parent, so I get that type of misogyny quite a bit. Whatever it is, we need to start talking about it and investigating it. Yes, we need to deal with the conglomerates that are stealing all of our money, that have been stealing it with the 5% in the U.S. especially. It kills me when I'm overseas, they think we're rich. I don't think they know the United States, not all of us are rich, not by a long shot, that this has been going on for so long to the point where it's ridiculous at this point, where this greed, this malevolent violence towards us, this misogyny, all of these things, the envy, it has to stop. And it's really quite simple. It's just those three things. If you can handle the core issues, then you can handle the larger issues. But until you do, it's just like going to the doctor and them giving you something for just the symptoms, and then that disease or that virus or whatever it is just going to keep coming back. It's going to come back in a different form. I mean, with Elon Musk, we may be, on the verge of being chipped and the women turn into robots. You see some of the things that he shows on his feed are unprofessional, with women bent over with their skirts up. And you wonder, if he does do this Department of Government Efficiency or Doge or whatever, is this going to be intertwined with that? I mean, you're talking about these men are little boys on the inside, all of them, and we could be chipped at any moment. And that misogyny and that envy could come up and creep up and be normalized into regular violence towards women in our society. So it's more than just the abortion issue. It's the issue of civility, right? I want to be given that same civility as someone else. I want to be recognized for what I believe in. So something that I just want to put out there in the universe for it to be known. A lot of what I do, I know people listen to, even though they pretend they don't. I know they do. My wisdom is something that cannot be held or lied about, or, how can I put this, covered up. Because in the future, it would choose to be helpful. And it's helpful now if you listen. That's just the thing, though. We all have to listen to one another. And a lot of us are just covering up our feelings, or, hyper realizing that if we act like men, then it will go away. If we choose to try to compete with them, then it will help our society. If we try to redo what they've done badly, then we'll look like we're stronger women. And the truth is, we really just haven't had our own, especially as Black women. It's not just BET her. We need to have our own conversations about who we are and how much progress we've made, and to have people take us seriously as Black women and not just the puppets that they put on stage in front of us, because we're not being heard. Right now, many women in general in the U.S. aren't being heard. And from what I'm saying, around the world, a number of these other women are quite used to the same. They're used to not being heard. And they might chalk it up to conservatism or whatever, especially where religion is concerned. But in actuality, it's just a creature of habit. This is how we went to school. We were indoctrinated to wear the hijab, to learn to read, using Islam. And I don't want to use this as a metaphor, but similarly to how the slaves were taught to read with the Bible. This is the way Westerners see it, because we saw it happen to us, the indoctrination, right? So it's hard for us to separate the two, because we've seen it within racism and patriarchy and male patriarchy and all of those things, but in the worst possible way. So when we see it in other areas, we can't necessarily automatically separate the two. So I'm not saying it's the same thing. I'm not talking negatively about Islam, but I'm saying literally the schools teach only the Quran. And this is what a number of women know until they're able to go to a more Western type of school. And in some rural areas, they don't know that. And this is true all over Asia. Okay. And for those who are more Western and get that opportunity, I applaud them. But I want them to know, and for you to know, that there's still that misogyny within their families, that they have to get married, and a number aren't having kids because it's too expensive. And in the United States, this is happening as well. Only the women are carrying more of the burden, because we don't have that necessarily male-centered familial undertaking where women are expected to be subservient to men and just get married and have possibly, an unhappy marriage. We'd all like to meet someone, me included, that's more like us, our male counterpart, right? We've all dreamt of that, but sometimes in life it may or may not be there. And so we have to live our lives the best that we can with what we have until that person comes along, or, if that person does not, be happy with what we have and in loving ourselves. But I find that some people have more of a difficult time doing that. And when they have difficult times, especially men, then everyone around them is going to have a difficult time, because they're going to be the attention getters. They're going to be, the little boys that wanted their mom's attention all the time, but that couldn't get it. And then my son is a hell raiser too, so I know. Yes, he has autism, but, when he's in a bad mood, everyone's going to be in a bad mood, and he's going to make sure everyone is. This is what I see, the difference between men and women, and from raising my daughter to raising my son, I can see the difference. And I assure you, I'm the same person raising both of them, but their personalities are totally different, because one knows he's entitled, and the other one is kind of like, well, I'm entitled because she's my mom, but, I can't have everything I want. So I don't know. Is the male entitlement, is that something that's within the DNA? I'm serious. I don't know. Or is it something that we're doing that's making them feel like they deserve entitlement over women, but we're not realizing it? More so, I think it's society telling them that they're entitled and them wanting that entitlement. Like this started when he started going to school and the other kids, the other boys, started telling him the difference between boys and girls. I mean, he already knew he was a boy. We've never had gender issues here in this household. But it was more so the entitlement of being a boy. And he came home and, he started telling me what the other boys are doing, and he laughed and joked with the other boys and, started doing male-centered things. And I said, oh, the other boys are, indoctrinating you, so to speak. So to a certain extent, I couldn't really do a whole lot about it. He had to go to school. But I think that once it gets to that point, women are kind of out of the game, so to speak. And all we can do is try to kind of play goalie as to, okay, this is acceptable, this is unacceptable for boys to do, and to try to guide him as to what's right and what's wrong. And this is where some of the boys are going off the rails. And they're becoming men, like technically over 18 becoming men, but on the inside, they're not growing into that male stature. And we're having this all across the board. Like when I say male stature, they're not maturing like they should. They feel like they still deserve something from women. They're envious of women. Women did something to them along the way. They've been taught they're entitled. And we're the problem. Yeah, no matter what the problem is, we're the problem. Is it Freudian? Is it their mommy issues? Is it potty training? Is that misogynist to think that? But I don't know. We're still at that bell hooks phase. No matter what we do, we can't move forward until we resolve this. And in particular, when I see it worldwide, it's disturbing. And it will be disturbing when Black women who are traveling, we're spreading out because, as we become more independent, we start realizing what I told you before, that job doesn't care about you. That man may not care about you, and you got to pay your bills and find somebody who does care about you. Maybe it's one and the same. Maybe the job is the man. Who knows? But once you start figuring out you got to find your way and make it for yourselves, we're going to have to start joining forces as women. And we're going to have to start helping one another and learning to have compassion towards one another, something that men took away or we were taught never to do by other mean women who were tortured by men, or their parent was tortured by men, or their parent was tortured by men. So it is something where violence, is sort of a disease. When it happens to one parent and that parent kind of trickles it down. I know I had a mean parent and a mean grandparent, so I can tell you they were both women. It does happen. But if you just simply blame the women, then you're doing yourself an injustice. What is the root cause? So that's what we need just to really get out there and discuss today. And I'm going to let you guys go. I'm not going to talk forever. But, just words of wisdom. It won't stop. The violence won't stop until we address the core issues. Men won't just stop being violent because you want to pretend like you're competing with them. These are not your brothers. They have a potential for more male violence. They have a potential to indoctrinate more. They can use 20 million different ways of doing it, but the classic ways of religious patriarchy through power systems such as marriage, they can even use nepotism now. We're seeing a lot more of that with Donald Trump, but we saw it with Joe Biden pardoning his son, right? You see it there in your face. This is my son, right? You see it right there. And a number of things we just kind of push to the side. We don't want to see it. But the truth is, it's never changed. It's just taking a different form. So as we start to understand the different forms that this violence takes, we should be able to, at this time, circumvent some of this violence by combating it head on instead of just denying that it's happening. You know, a lot of what I'm seeing in our community is just a denial. And it's time to stop denying this because we're not resolving anything. That a lot of that with Kamala Harris was denial. You know, she's all of a sudden going to be African American, not just black, which I don't believe she was either one ever. But then she's going to be qualified enough to have this position and a likable person, which she honestly is not. And then she's going to have a wonderful track record of service, which she does not. Not against her, you know, or anything that is to take away from her, but her track record as a prosecutor was horrible for both black men and black women, the people she proclaims to be helping. How could we ignore that? That's denial. They picked the worst candidate because they knew she would lose. And as far as I'm concerned, she was in on the whole thing. You know, she may still be president, as I've said before, if Joe Biden unfortunately doesn't make it, or if he decides to resign. But is that a victory? See, and that's another cop-out. They've essentially said, we're not qualified for this position, which we are, and other people, if they had had the right people in place, which they never will, because you have to play the game. And in their game, in their minds, we're a joke. We're unqualified people, and the only way we're ever going to get to the position of a white male is to trick someone or to, you know, fall into it, which is the exact opposite of the way that it really is. So I want people to understand the inversion of reality and what we're going through right now. It is the inversion. We're upside down and backwards. None of this should be happening this way. It is absurd. It is the ultimate Freemasonic game, right? We're not supposed to be playing this game at all. So I'm just saying, stop playing the game and start interpreting it the way that it should be interpreted as move forward. Ignore it, work together, and get it done. And don't let these people who, you know, some of them really do have psychological problems, whether they be the actual perpetrators of violence or those who are helping them, don't let them ruin your life or try to invade your life and your privacy and make you feel bad about who you are when you're better than they are. Don't let them bring you down, the gossipers, the people that are instigating, that are getting paid by these people to do this. Because there's, you know, in some senses, networks of people. They've used witchcraft, they've used black magic, they've used every technique they have, and they'll claim to be the most religious people in the world. And to tell you the truth, I believe them. Because religion and those ancient practices, the ones I've told you about, that were misused with women, are still embedded within the syncretic system. And you can use them, but in positive ways. Many people are afraid of them. You know, witchcraft can be used positively. Black magic can be used positively. You can positively use the techniques they're using instead of just being afraid of them and only using them in the negative. And this is what they're teaching people, black and white. One is good, one is bad. And we're going to teach you how to use the bad, but then tell you to pretend to be the good, because that other technique is pagan. And this is what you're doing. You're teaching them a lesson about paganism. It's so silly. It's so silly. We should be well past this at this time. You should be educated enough. I mean, the library's there, the internet's there. Go do your own research. And you will find that this has gone on for too long, and it's only increasing more ignorance and more violence. I know some people don't have access in some countries to libraries and the internet, but I mean, in the U.S. and in the West, you're just being lazy. If you want to be indoctrinated, you want to believe stuff from when you were in elementary school, go to church, fall out. We used to call them fallout churches. My aunt went to one when I was younger, or took me to one, and they jump up, or they call it jump up fallout church, and jump up to the music and fall out when the spirit hits you. All like, if you want to do that, hey, do whatever pleases you. But I'm saying, understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and be in charge of all of those things in your life instead of letting other people tell you what you are. You define what you are, and you'll be a better person for it. So that's all I'm saying. Anyway, I got to go. I'll talk to you guys probably on next week. I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you later. I'm out. Bye.